The room went quiet in a way that felt violent. Not awkward silence, not polite silence, the kind where people stop breathing because they realize something irreversible has just happened. I stood near the bar with a champagne flute I hadn't touched, watching my husband's phone mirrored onto a 40-foot screen behind him, every message enlarged, time-stamped, undeniable. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered his name like it was a prayer. And then I heard the sound I'd waited weeks for, his voice cracking as he said, "This isn't what it looks like," to a room full of executives who already knew it was worse. My name is Alara Wynn, and until that night, I was the woman everyone described as calm, easygoing, understanding, the kind of wife people felt comfortable joking around in front of, even when the joke was at my expense. I learned later that calm is what people call you when they think you won't fight back. I married Calder Wynn 7 years ago, back when his ambition felt charming instead of corrosive. He worked in corporate strategy at Halcyon Systems, a company that loved sleek branding and ruthless internal competition. Calder loved it there because it rewarded confidence even when it bordered on arrogance. At home, though, he was quieter, or at least he used to be. Somewhere along the way, quiet turned into distracted, and distracted turned into absent, and absent turned into a man who spent more time smiling at his phone than looking at his wife. At first, I told myself what everyone tells themselves: work stress, deadlines, promotions, the usual excuses that make neglect feel temporary instead of intentional. I noticed how he angled his screen away from me on the couch, how he muted notifications before bed, how he laughed silently at messages he never shared. Once I asked who he was talking to, and he said, "Just work," without missing a beat. The ease of the lie should have warned me. There was a moment early on, a small one but important, when I almost confronted him. He'd come home late, dropped his keys too loudly on the counter, and kissed my cheek like it was an obligation. I said, "You feel far away lately," and he smiled at me with that practiced patience and replied, "You're imagining things." I remember standing there after he walked away, thinking maybe I was being needy, maybe I was overreacting, and I hated myself for how quickly I accepted his version of reality over my own. This is where the audience needs to know something. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was learning. The first crack in his story didn't come from his phone. It came from our bank account, a charge I didn't recognize, tucked between legitimate expenses, small enough to hide if you weren't looking closely. A boutique hotel downtown, one night. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, my heart doing that slow, heavy drop that tells you something is wrong before your mind catches up. When I asked him about it, he didn't hesitate. "Client dinner," he said. "Stayed late. Easier than driving home." He even sounded annoyed that I'd asked, which worked exactly as intended. I apologized. That was his first real victory. I didn't check his phone that night. I didn't search his pockets or interrogate him or cry in the bathroom. I did something far more dangerous. I waited. Waiting gives people time to reveal patterns, and Calder had patterns. The hotel charges kept coming, always spaced just far enough apart to seem incidental. His phone habits became ritualistic, bathroom breaks that lasted too long, morning smiles that didn't belong to me. And then there was the work party announcement. Halcyon Systems loved throwing lavish internal events, especially when they were about to announce something big. This one was framed as a culture celebration, which usually meant promotions, restructurings, or acquisitions. Calder mentioned it casually over dinner, barely looking up from his phone. "Big night," he said. "You'll want to come." Something in his tone felt rehearsed, like he'd already imagined the evening without me and was now adjusting the script. That night, after he fell asleep, I made my first real move. My hands shook as I picked up his phone, not because I was scared of what I'd find, but because I knew this was the moment everything would change. I didn't try his passcode. I didn't need to. He used the same one for everything. Ambitious men often confuse consistency with intelligence. What I found wasn't just an affair, it was contempt. Her name was Maria Holt, a senior analyst on his team. The messages weren't poetic or passionate. They were transactional, cruel in their casualness. He mocked my cooking, my voice, the way I dressed. He joked about me being predictable, safe, background noise. He told her I'd never leave because I was comfortable. That word appeared again and again, like a justification. The hotel bookings were theirs. The late nights were lies. And the worst part wasn't the sex, it was the laughter at my expense. I didn't screenshot everything right away. That would have been reckless. Instead, I photographed timestamps, saved booking confirmations, forwarded receipts to a secure email I'd created months earlier for freelance work. Each step felt like walking across a frozen lake, listening for cracks. Once, his phone buzzed while I was mid-transfer, and I nearly dropped it. I stood there in the dark, heart racing, imagining him waking up, seeing me, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. When the buzzing stopped, I exhaled so hard my chest hurt. This was the dangerous part of planning, the part no one romanticizes. Fear doesn't make you brave. It makes you precise. Halfway through my quiet investigation, something unexpected happened. Calder started acting attentive again. Compliments, flowers. He even suggested a weekend trip, said we needed to reconnect. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I misreading things? Was this salvageable? That doubt was the emotional valley, the point where the story could have turned inward instead of outward. And then I saw the message he sent her from the bathroom, while I stood in the kitchen holding the flowers. Playing husband tonight. Worth it if it keeps her calm. That sentence aligned me fully with myself, and with anyone who has ever felt gaslit by politeness. I didn't confront him. I smiled. I thanked him for the flowers, and I began planning the work party. The idea didn't come fully formed. At first, I imagined a private confrontation, maybe a dramatic exit. But private endings let liars rewrite history. I needed witnesses. I needed context. I needed scale. The party was perfect. Executives, board members, HR, his team, everyone who controlled his future gathered in one room under the assumption of celebration. Pulling it off required access I didn't technically have. I volunteered to help with event logistics under the guise of wanting to be involved. The coordinator was grateful for the extra hands. I learned where the AV controls were, who managed the screens, how presentations were cued. Every new detail increased the risk. At one point, Calder walked up behind me while I was reviewing the event schedule on my laptop, and I slammed it shut too fast. He raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" he asked. I met his gaze and said, "Just excited." He smiled, satisfied. That smile stayed with me for days. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not because I was rehearsing what I'd say, but because I kept imagining everything that could go wrong. A file corrupting, a technician refusing my request, Calder noticing something off before I was ready. At 3 a.m., I almost deleted everything, almost chose the safety of silence over the violence of truth. And then I remembered the way he laughed at my voice. I remembered the word comfortable. I got out of bed and double-checked every backup. The party itself started exactly as planned. Too perfectly, in fact. Music, drinks, laughter. Calder was in his element, shaking hands, playing the role he'd perfected. Mireya was there too, across the room, red dress, confident smile. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. That surprised me. I realized then that she didn't see me as a threat. She saw me as a prop. That was her mistake. When the executive VP took the stage to announce the surprise, I felt the room lean forward. This was my window. I moved toward the AV table, heart pounding so loud I was sure someone could hear it. The technician hesitated when I gave him the USB. "This wasn't on the schedule," he said. I smiled and leaned in just enough to be heard over the music. "It's approved. Calder Wynn requested it personally." That was the first resistance, the first almost failure. He frowned, scanning the room, looking for confirmation. Calder was laughing with a board member, unaware. The technician shrugged and plugged it in. The screen flickered, and then the first message appeared. I watched Calder's face from across the room as recognition dawned, horror following close behind. He stepped toward the stage, mouth opening to stop something that was already moving faster than him. The messages rolled on, each one a nail, each timestamp a hammer. Laughter died, whispers spread. Someone gasped, and then the room went silent in that violent way again. The silence didn't last. It shattered. Someone near the back let out a sharp laugh that sounded like disbelief. Another voice followed. "Is this real?" Then chairs scraped, glasses clinked, the low roar of 100 conversations igniting at once. The screen kept scrolling because I had programmed it that way. Calder lunged toward the stage, but two things stopped him. First, the executive VP raised a hand instinctively, palm out as if Calder were a child interrupting class. Second, Maria screamed his name. That scream did more damage than the messages. Every head snapped toward her. The woman in the red dress who had looked so confident seconds ago now looked feral, exposed. She tried to push through the crowd toward him, heels slipping, drink spilling down her arm. "Turn it off!" she shouted. "This is private!" Someone near her muttered, "Apparently not," and laughter rippled again, crueler this time. I hadn't moved. I stood exactly where I'd been before, near the bar, champagne still untouched, watching the implosion like a controlled burn. Calder finally found my eyes across the room. For a split second, he looked confused, like he was trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the one dismantling him in public. Then his expression hardened into something uglier, betrayal, as if he were the victim. "Ilara!" he shouted, voice cracking through the noise. "What the hell is this?" That was my cue, but I didn't rush it. Silence, when used correctly, is terrifying. I let the room quiet itself, executives waving for calm, security hovering uncertainly at the edges. When I spoke, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "What it looks like," I said. "Your private conversations, your hotel bookings, your jokes about your wife, all of it." I gestured toward the screen, where another message froze mid-scroll. Calder telling Mariah that the party would be the perfect cover because I'd be too busy playing supportive spouse to notice anything else. A board member read it out loud without realizing they were doing it. The words sounded different spoken by someone else. He went pale. Calder tried to speak again, but the VP cut him off. "We'll address this in a moment," she said tightly. "Security, please escort—" She stopped, clearly recalibrating. "Actually, everyone stay where you are." That wasn't part of my plan. This was the resistance, authority intervening, not to protect me, but to contain the damage. For a heartbeat, panic flared. Had I overplayed my hand? Would they shut it down before the full picture landed? My fingers curled around the stem of my glass so hard it hurt. Then the VP turned back to the screen and said, "Continue." The technician hit play. More messages, more receipts, dates, times, rooms, a thread where Calder coached Mariah on how to avoid HR scrutiny, a joke about never getting caught if you control the narrative. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else walked out. Mariah finally reached Calder and grabbed his arm. "Say something," she hissed. "Fix this." He shook her off, eyes wild. "This is your fault," he snapped back, too loud, too public. "You said you were careful." That was it. That was the moment everything tipped from scandal into career-ending disaster. The room didn't just hear infidelity, they heard liability. I watched as the VP leaned toward the HR director, whispering urgently. Phones were already out, texts flying, damage control starting too late. Calder realized it at the same time I did. He looked around, chest heaving, understanding dawning not just that his marriage was over, but that his carefully curated professional persona had collapsed in front of the very people who upheld it. "This isn't the full story," he tried, voice hoarse. "She's unstable. She's been paranoid for months." I laughed. I didn't mean to, but the sound escaped anyway, sharp and clear. "You mocked me for being quiet," I said. "You told her I was background noise. Turns out, silence carries." That line landed. I could feel it. Heads nodded. Someone murmured, "Damn," like they'd just watched a good plot twist. Security finally moved in, but not toward me, toward Calder and Mariah. The VP's voice was clipped, Professional, lethal. You both need to leave. HR will contact you. Do not return to this building until instructed. Mariah started crying, real tears now, mascara streaking. Calder looked at me one last time as they escorted him out, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The fallout didn't wait until morning. By the time I got home, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Unknown numbers, messages from colleagues I barely knew, a few from people who clearly thought they were being supportive, but couldn't hide their curiosity. Are you okay? That was intense. Did you plan that? I ignored them all. At 11:42 p.m., Calder called. I declined. He called again. Declined. Then a text. We need to talk. You've ruined everything. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow calm. At 12:01 a.m., he sent another. You had no right. I slept anyway. The next morning, the story broke outside the building. Someone had recorded the screen. Someone else had leaked it. Halion Systems trended locally before noon. Calder tried to control it. That was his fatal mistake. He posted a LinkedIn statement. It was long, defensive, and full of corporate speak apologies that never actually admitted wrongdoing. He framed himself as the victim of a personal matter exploited in a professional setting. He hinted at my emotional volatility. He disabled comments within 10 minutes, but screenshots traveled faster than damage control. People noticed the contradictions. They noticed the tone. And then someone noticed that he'd forgotten to remove Mariah's name from one paragraph. That post did more harm than my screenshots ever could. It was proof of arrogance, not remorse. HR didn't even wait for the investigation to conclude before placing him on immediate suspension pending termination. Mariah was escorted out of the building when she tried to return that afternoon, sobbing, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. The emotional valley hit me that night. I sat alone in the living room, the house too quiet, the weight of what I'd done finally settling. I replayed his face at the party, the way the room had turned on him, the way I hadn't intervened even when it got ugly. A question crept in, unwelcome and persistent. Had I gone too far? That doubt lasted exactly 3 minutes, because then I opened my email. A forwarded chain from Calder to Mariah, dated 2 weeks before the party. Subject line, exit strategy. He outlined a plan to slowly paint me as unstable, document erratic behavior, and position himself as the reasonable spouse in anticipation of a clean separation. He joked about how judges love a calm man. He ended it with, "Don't worry, she won't see it coming." I closed the laptop and let the doubt die where it belonged. Calder didn't stop trying to reach me. Calls turned into voicemails, voicemails into apologies, apologies into threats. He blamed stress. He blamed Mariah. He blamed me. When none of it worked, he went silent for 2 days. Then he showed up at my door. I didn't open it. I watched through the camera as he paced, ran his hands through his hair, knocked too hard. "Ilara," he called, "please, we need to fix this." Fix, like it was a software bug, not a character flaw. When I didn't respond, he sent an email to my parents. That was his last move, and it backfired spectacularly. My father forwarded it to me with one line, "Do what you need to do." My mother didn't say anything at all, which was her way of saying everything. By the end of the week, Halcyon Systems made it official. Calder was terminated for violations of company policy, misuse of company resources, and conduct unbecoming of a senior employee. Mariah resigned before they could fire her. The VP emailed me personally, apologizing for what I'd been subjected to and thanking me for my transparency. The word made me smile. Calder sent one final message that night. "You didn't just expose me, you erased me." I stared at it for a long time before replying with the only honest answer I had. "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." That wasn't the end of the story. It was just the point of no return, because when a man who believes he controls the narrative loses that control, he doesn't disappear quietly. He panics, he flails, and sometimes he destroys himself trying to regain ground that no longer exists. And Calder was about to prove that in the most public way possible. Calder didn't vanish after his termination. Men like him never do. They believe silence is temporary, that if they wait long enough, the world will forget, or forgive, or get bored. He waited exactly 4 days. That Monday morning, my phone lit up with a news alert before I even got out of bed. A local business outlet had published an exclusive interview. Former Halcyon director speaks out after viral workplace incident. The thumbnail was Calder, jaw set, eyes earnest, hands folded like a man pleading for fairness. I didn't click it right away. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape of his defense. By noon, I'd read every word anyway. He framed himself as a devoted husband blindsided by a manufactured spectacle. He accused the company of failing to protect employee privacy. He implied, without quite stating, that I'd hacked his accounts. He never denied the affair, he just minimized it, recasting it as a brief emotional lapse weaponized by a spouse seeking revenge. That interview was his final undoing, because in his desperation to sound reasonable, Calder contradicted his own timeline. He mentioned dates that didn't align with the screenshots already circulating. He claimed the messages were taken out of context, then described contexts that made them worse. He even suggested that Mariah had exaggerated their relationship, which prompted her to post a tearful video response accusing him of throwing her under the bus to save his image. I watched that video exactly once. That was enough. The comments were merciless. Former colleagues chimed in with vague but damning statements about long-standing concerns. An ex-intern liked one of the comments and then unliked it too late. Someone dug up an old panel discussion where Calder had lectured about ethics and transparency. The irony spread like gasoline on a spark. By Tuesday, Halcyon's legal team issued a public clarification. Short, clinical, final. They cited multiple policy violations, corroborated evidence, and internal audits. They wished him well in his future endeavors, corporate code for "this is over." Calder emailed me that night. Not an apology, not a plea, a demand. You need to issue a statement retracting your accusations. This has gone too far. I will not be made a villain in my own life. I didn't respond. That silence drove him further off the edge. 2 days later, my lawyer forwarded me a document Calder had filed pro se, without counsel. A defamation complaint. Sloppy. Emotional, full of screenshots he thought helped him but only proved my case. He accused me of intentional infliction of emotional distress while attaching messages where he mocked me for being emotionally flat. My lawyer called me laughing. "He's handing us the rope," she said. "Do you want to pull?" I said nothing for a moment, then asked one question. "Can we make it public?" She paused. "If he proceeds, yes, everything becomes discoverable." That was the last decision I needed to make. Calder escalated fast after filing. He sent cease and desist emails to bloggers, threatened to sue commenters, posted another statement insisting he was being silenced. Each move made him look more unhinged, more entitled, more like the man he'd always been behind closed doors. Discovery was brutal. His attorney withdrew after reviewing the materials. The second one lasted a week. The third tried to negotiate quietly, suggesting a mutual non-disparagement agreement if I'd consider moving on. I declined. During discovery, we uncovered more than just the affair. Expense reports, misuse of company travel funds, a pattern of mentoring junior employees that crossed ethical lines, HR complaints that had been buried because Calder knew how to play the system. None of it had been my goal, but all of it mattered. Calder cracked during deposition. He raised his voice, contradicted himself, accused me directly on record of ruining his life out of spite.
When my attorney asked him why he'd mocked me in private messages, he snapped, "Because she let me." That transcript circulated internally at Halcyon within hours. Someone leaked it externally by the end of the week. The lawsuit collapsed soon after. Calder withdrew his complaint without prejudice, a technicality that fooled no one. The damage was done. He'd proven, publicly and preeminently, exactly who he was. I thought that would be the end. Then came the job offers. Not for him, for me. People I'd never met reached out, quietly at first, then openly. Speaking engagements, consulting roles, a seat on an ethics advisory panel. I turned most of them down, but the invitations told a story Calder couldn't control. While he fought to salvage a reputation, mine was being rewritten without my consent. That shift unsettled me more than the exposure ever had, because power, when it arrives unexpectedly, demands a decision. Use it or step away. Calder tried one last move before disappearing for good. He showed up unannounced at my parents' house. My mother called me, voice shaking. "He's here," she said. "He says he just wants to explain." I told her to ask him to leave. She did. He refused. My father called the police. When the officers arrived, Calder didn't resist. He just looked tired, empty. He told them it was a misunderstanding, that he'd lost everything and didn't know where else to go. They escorted him off the property anyway. That image, Calder standing in the driveway, hands in his pockets, watching the door close, was the last time I saw him in person. Weeks passed. The noise faded. New stories replaced mine. The internet moved on, as it always does. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Maria at a cafe across town. She looked different, smaller, less polished. She saw me, froze, then surprised us both by walking over. "I didn't know," she said, immediately defensive, "about the other stuff, about how he planned things." "I know," I replied, and I did. He always let other people carry the consequences. She nodded, eyes glossy. "I thought I was special." So did I. We stood there in an awkward truce, two women briefly united by the same mistake. Then she thanked me for not naming me in the lawsuit, for not dragging her further than she already was, and left. I watched her go without satisfaction or bitterness, just relief. The house felt different after everything ended, quieter but not empty. I rearranged furniture, donated clothes Calder had bought me because he liked them, changed the locks. The physical space caught up to the emotional one, room by room. One night, as I sat on the balcony, city lights blinking below, I thought about the woman I'd been before all of this.
The one who mistook silence for peace? The one who believed being low maintenance made her lovable? The one who didn't check phones because she didn't want to be that wife? I wasn't angry with her anymore. She'd done the best she could with the information she had. When she learned more, she changed. That's not revenge. That's clarity. Calder sent one final email 6 months later. No subject line, no greeting, just a paragraph. "I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it. I lost everything." I stared at the words, waiting for something to stir inside me. Guilt, triumph, vindication. Nothing did. I archived the message and closed my laptop. People still ask me how I planned it, how I stayed so calm, how I didn't break when I realized the man I loved was mocking me behind my back. The truth is simpler than they expect. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was learning, and when I finally spoke, I didn't raise my voice. I let the truth do the damage on its own. The irony Calder never understood is this. I didn't expose him to punish him. I exposed him because I refused to live inside a lie ever again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was mine.
You've just stepped into her revenge side, where every wound finds its justice, and every silence ends with truth. If her story struck a chord, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Another secret waits in the next video. See how her revenge begins.